Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Casual Chat. So, I am Patricia, and I'm here with Aaron Meta.
Hello again.
We're actually going to be doing something a little bit interesting here. So, Aaron and I, as you guys know, we talk about a lot of nostalgic things here, stuff that we grew up with on the 80s and 90s. But in this particular month, we're actually going to be talking about movies that we grew up with as kids that may or may not be as good as we remember it. And here's the catch. Every podcast, we're going to be switching. So I'm going to be introducing Aaron to a movie that I grew up with, and he's going to be introducing me to a movie that he grew up with. And before this, we had never seen it before, and we're just going into this 100% blindly.
Well, just add some more context to this as well, is that these effectively are they're not like our favorite movies. These are the movies that we just happen to come across. These are the movies where, grandma and grandpa would go to the video store, they'd find something that, oh, hey, this will entertain the grandchildren. It ended up in our VHS collection, and it just ends up in circulation, as it always does with these type of things. So, that's the whole idea of this. It's not like, YouTubers today are just going on streaming sites and just finding, the crap, this is, we didn't go out to search for this. This came to us.
Yeah, or in my case, as you guys know from some of the podcasts that I've talked about over the years, that my dad knew a guy who had access to a lot of VHS tapes. Some of them official, others have been bootleg that he used to distribute around like an old video store. And so he would bring in some old VHS tapes for us to watch. And some of them we kept and some of them that we rented. And we've collected them over the years. Others have been collections from VHS tapes that my cousins used to own whenever that my sister and I would go over to their houses after school. So, yeah, this would be in passing. So, yeah, essentially where, back then, we didn't exactly know about a lot of the movies that we would be watching. It's just that, if we saw a cover of a movie that looked really cool, we would pick it up. Or it would just be like a bootleg tape that just had the name of it, and you just had to go and watch it and see if you liked it or not.
And also, a lot of the stuff also as well is that, it was just recorded off TV. A few of the things that we, were watching at the time, the first time I watched Alice in Wonderland was actually on, when it was broadcast on ITV,
really?
back in, my dad went to the 80th degree to, record Alice in Wonderland, cut out all the ad breaks, and, put it all together as one movie.
Yeah, a similar story with me with All Dogs Go to Heaven, in which I actually saw it on, a recorded bootleg VHS tape right before we officially got it, and it actually, cut in splices into, various sections. I didn't even actually get to see the full ending because the VHS tape just stopped right there.
Yeah. Do you remember, when bootlegging became such a problem that Disney started, doing, the holographic image, saying, this is how you know you have the genuine article of, of a Disney VHS tape.
Yeah.
And if you buy those bootleg tapes, you're not going to get the same quality as you would do in a VHS, which is, kind of weird, really, saying, because, VHS tapes degrade over time, as you know, and obviously they break.
And don't forget about all those commercials about the Disney Vault. It's every few years, this specific Disney classic has been unlocked, and, this is the only chance you're going to get it. Otherwise, it's going to go back into the vault, and you'll never get it again.
And even when those DVDs were coming out, I can say, when the bootlegging was still a problem, they played those things you can't skip, saying, you wouldn't steal a car, you wouldn't steal this, or why would you steal a movie? And actually, funny enough, I think there was a story actually going around that, so the font of that, you wouldn't steal a movie was actually itself stolen from somewhere else. You couldn't make it up.
No. Anyway, So for this month, I'm going to be going first, and then next week it'll be Aaron's turn, and then the following week will be my turn, and then the last week will be Aaron's turn. And you get the gist. So let's get started, shall we? So the first movie we're going to be talking about is the 1993 animated film Once Upon a Forest, based off of the idea of Ray Lambert, who was a Welsh writer, and he was a creator of a story called A Furling Story. And it's actually interesting because there's not a lot of information on Ray Lambert other than a lot of research that these really cool people on Reddit did, where around the 1970s, he came up with the idea of A Furling Story, and he wanted to write it in a series of children's books, but he was never able to have it published. And then finally, he got the opportunity to work on HTV in the 80s. Now, Aaron, why don't you talk about HTV for those who don't know?
HTV used to be known as Harlock Television, and it was the first ever Welsh television station. production. And by the way, this actually has a bit of history behind it because this was the first British television station to air Sesame Street before
Wow.
Channel 4 took over the license.
That's crazy.
I know, exactly. And so HTV, I mean, it tried to like be like a bigger franchise, but I mean, obviously it was already like broadcasting all of Wales at this time, and it actually, I think as far as I'm aware, I might be wrong about this, but I believe it took over a failing franchise that like tried to like become bigger than it actually was, and then ended up like losing the license because of that. So HTV not only did the Welsh broadcasting, but they ended up doing there was also HTV Southwest as well, which then later on became something else. I can't remember off the top of my head. My By the way, there's a guy called, I think his name's Adam Martin. I think he covers this stuff a lot easier than I do. So if you have a chance to check him out, then by all means do. But anyway, I digress. So the great thing about it is HTV is that they actually did put their hands in quite a few animated projects, and so one of them was Once Upon a Forest.
Yeah.
that we're talking about today.
Yeah, so he actually pitched the idea of Once Upon a Forest over to Mike Young. Now, for those who actually know about the name Mike Young, he is the creator of Super Ted. And I'm sure a lot of British kids around the 80s and 90s already know about Super Ted, but for those who don't know who Super Ted is, essentially it's like a little teddy bear who becomes a superhero.
By the way, the PSA of like crossing the streets involving Spotty is actually available on YouTube. So if you have a chance to actually, okay, it's not a fair representation of Super Ted, but at least it gives you an idea of like what the show's about.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, he pitched it over to Mike Young, and then Mike Young pitched it over to Hanna-Barbera. Hanna-Barbera wanted to do a 1-hour TV movie called The Endangered, but then they were thinking to themselves, well, maybe we can make this into a much bigger project. Let's make it into an 1.5-hour long film and call it Once Upon a Forest. And this is the movie that we essentially have. And this is the third out of the 3 Hanna-Barbera animated films that went into theaters. The first one being Charlotte's Web, and the second one being Heidi's Song. Now, this is the last Hanna-Barbera animated movie that was ever released. And yeah, you can definitely see why, considering that it had a $13 million budget and it only made back $6.6 million, mostly because it was released around the same time as, I don't know if you've ever heard this movie, Jurassic Park or something like that.
It's amazing. Like, every time we come across an animated project that we end up doing either a casual chat or like, something in regards to our podcast, it seems to always get blown out of the water by something either Jurassic Park or World or some dinosaur-related thing. Have you ever noticed that?
That's true, yeah, especially with our recent, PixMix episodes.
Maybe we're going down the wrong. Maybe we should start doing, a whole podcast on Jurassic Park, maybe.
Yeah, at this point in time, why not?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, but mind you, there's probably loads of those anyway, so I mean,
that's
I think,
true, yeah.
We're doing something unique.
Yeah.
Crappy animation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so, long story short, the movie was a massive bomb in the box office, and, it pretty much became forgotten, unless you were a kid who grew up in the 90s who saw this movie on theaters, or if you watch it on VHS like I did.
I mean, a lot of the stuff that ended up failing in theaters, funny enough, when the minute it came to DVD and VHS, all of a sudden there was interest in what was going on with it. And so I think, the same thing that happened with Blinky Bill, and also the same thing that happened with, some of the other, movies that we're going to talk about, throughout the time. Like, the minute they left theaters and the minute they came into home media, all of a sudden there was, some sort of, cult interest in, these projects. And so I think, it's interesting to see, how much of an appreciation would we have probably given some of these projects if they'd just been straight to DVD or straight to VHS, rather than being appearing in the theaters first and having a very poor showing to show for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so now for those who are wondering if this is a Don Bluth movie, it's not.
No.
Here's the thing. They actually, if you watch the trailer, they trick you into thinking that it's a Don Bluth movie.
It is morning in your life. Day is breaking, oh so bright.
From the creator of An American Tail, meet the Furlings. They're fun, they're funny, and they're full of mischief.
Furlings! We were flying.
20th Century Fox presents a high-flying adventure that will send your spirits soaring. Once Upon a Forest.
Well, I mean, it's sensible marketing because, like, they're saying, like, okay, here's one element of one movie that was you really, really like, and here's another element of another movie that you really, really like. And, I mean, Don Bluth and Steven Spielberg don't necessarily need to factor into it. I mean, like, the idea is that you're taking, the things that, the music and the animation and the other things that, made this other project really good. And you're saying it's now in this thing. And if you like that thing, you're definitely going to like this thing.
Yeah.
So the marketing, I don't think I have a problem with, I don't think.
Right. But there were some people who actually did. There were some people who actually saw this movie and thought that it was done by Don Bluth and was produced by Steven Spielberg.
But they didn't say that. You weren't paying attention.
Yeah, some people were gypped and were actually pretty upset with it.
Why? Like, if it's your fault if you walk into a movie and it didn't have Don Bluth and Steven Spielberg's name on it, that's not the people who promoted the movie's fault.
I know, that's true, yeah. But anyway, nonetheless, so yeah.
Read the fine print.
Read the fine print, yeah. So yeah, this was once again one of those movies that came out around the 90s that was trying to bring awareness to the environment. You had Fern Gully, The Last Rainforest, and you have another movie that we're going to be talking about throughout the course of the month. And yeah, I mean, there was like a lot of emphasis of like taking care of the environment and be aware of the animals and the creatures that live there and all the plants and, making sure that whatever that you're doing, you have to be careful with, not taking things for granted. And yeah, it's definitely here in this case in which you have our three main protagonists having to save their friend from dying from poisonous gas that she inhaled when a truck came by and accidentally crashed into it. And they only have a few days' time right before she dies.
Yeah, and so, I mean, like, it's a good setup in that sense. It's just, unfortunately, there's the rest of the movie that you have to contend with.
All right, so yeah, let's talk about our characters first. So we have Russell, who is a hedgehog, Abigail, who's a field mouse, and Edgar, who's a mole. It's kind of funny because it's very similar to, like, the whole L. Frank Baum Elphaba thing, in which, like, if you take the initials, it actually spells out the names. So you have Russell, Abigail, Edgar, Ray.
Yeah, and then you have Cornelius, who is played by Michael Crawford, and my goodness, does he really like get so invested into his character? And
I mean, it makes a lot of sense because the wife of one of the producers really, really wanted Michael Crawford in this movie after she saw him perform in Phantom of the Opera.
I get that, but I mean, like, the wisest thing is that at least when they brought him in, they gave him a song number, so
yeah, that's true.
At least they did more than what Happily Ever After did.
Well, which we'll talk about next time.
Which we'll talk about next time, yeah. But it's crazy to think that they brought Michael Crawford in, and he basically is his performance I think sticks out compared to like everybody else who's in this movie. Like he is they give him this character Cornelius, who obviously is this very wise but also very irritated old man, and who effectively is stuck with these furlings, as he calls them, and which all these young animals. And I guess he's sort of like the teacher.
Yeah, he's like the teacher.
Yeah, but it's never really established. Is he just like some old man that they just leave the kids with, and he is responsible for bringing up the next generation of the forest?
I mean, I'm guessing. I mean, in the beginning of the movie, we saw Abigail's father saying "Oh, when I was your age, I couldn't wait to get to Cornelius's class." So I guess he's like the old guy who knows everything about the forest.
How old is he? The fact that where he's teaching this is probably the second generation, I guess maybe he's doing.
Yeah.
And the fact that they the timing of Cornelius is sort of confusing a little bit, because the way that he told his story about his origins, it almost feels like it wasn't too long ago, and it's a bit messy, but I think how they've kind of put this character together. He's this wise old man who's sort of like Yoda, sort of like Doc Brown from Back to the Future, sort of these kind of teacher roles that we've already seen, quite a few times already, and they can't really establish what is this guy's main thing. It just seems like he's a jack of all trades, if you will. He can do medicine, he can do teaching, he can do philosophy, he can do history, he can do all sorts of things. You would have thought that he was characters like that are normally like leaders of tribes, or that have sort of leadership roles. But if anything, he's just kind of sidelined in this whole area as you're just some 2-bit teacher, really. Like,
Yeah,
you know.
he's definitely the wisest amongst all of the village of Dapperwood, which is the name of the forest that they live in. And yeah, I mean, he's essentially like the teacher who's trying to train the next generation of these animals so that they not only know about their surroundings, but they can also stay away from the humans, which are deemed very dangerous. Because in his backstory, he had a really, really bad experience with humans when, humans came by into his home. And, when he and his sister escaped, his parents were trapped and he never saw them again. And so now he's warning them to stay away from the road and, don't inhale the deadly gas and, stay away from anybody who is a human because they're very dangerous.
Yeah, I guess the one blessing is that, the one thing they could have easily have done, and tell me if you've seen this character before. The scientist comes in to say that there is a terrible thing that's about to happen in the movie, and everyone just like either dismisses him or laughs at him or whatever. The terrible things happen, and then he's there to save the day. It's like, at least they didn't shoehorn him into that trope that we're all, in all these disaster movies that now we're constantly being, bombarded with in today in the 2020. And I guess you could say that's one blessing. I guess you could say out of Cornelius in this movie.
Yeah.
He's not a trope.
I guess that's true. Yeah. They're rambunctious kids and they just play around and they goof off. And he's just like really upset and disappointed that, they're acting like, rambunctious kids when they should treat his teachings very, very seriously.
I mean, like, if they're kids. I mean, like, oh dear, how dare kids act like kids? I mean, I can understand that, but I guess what they were trying to do is they were trying to do a coming of age story as well, on top of like, doing this whole like, oh, we got to save our friend before he dies, like, we just did that whole thing. Like, I guess that's what they were trying to do, amongst of all the other things that they were trying to do. But the one thing I would say about the way that they've put this whole thing together is like, once again, like some of the other movies that we're going to talk about in this, I guess you can series across November, is that, we start off with a simple story, but then we dilute it with, like, all sorts of, like, crazy nonsense that happens to go on in this. Like, for example, like, a good grief, we have to go with, like, the whole funeral thing with the birds.
Yeah, so, it's actually kind of like a major turn into a completely different direction where, after they just gotten chased by an owl and almost dying, they hear a funeral march of this bird named Bosworth who is trapped in mud because the yellow dragons had destroyed their marshlands and turned it into mud. And so they're having this whole funeral service of him being stuck in the mud and never coming out. And then, Edgar's like, hey, we can get him out. And then when they do get him out, they have this huge gospel song celebrating the whole thing, which actually, by the way, is done by a choir in the First Baptist Church in Los Angeles.
Which, I mean, like, it's nice that they get a song number this, but why? In the context of the movie, why? Like, we're in a race against time to rescue a girl from dying, and yet here we are dancing around like idiots, with a Baptist choir.
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, it's actually funny because, again, I was reading into this Reddit post about the behind the scenes of Once Upon a Forest, as well as the information about Ray Lambert. But apparently 10 minutes was cut from this movie, and originally Glenn Close was supposed to play an important character that was supposed to help them along their journey. So it makes me wonder about, like, why couldn't they cut off the bird scene and then add in this other scene that was cut off from, because of time constraints? It makes me wonder about what if that could have happened.
It's kind of like adding the soup scene back into Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Like, the soup, doesn't really, like, the music in your soup, I mean, as interesting of a song that it is, it doesn't really carry the story any further, really. So you can see why it was cut for time. And if anything, maybe this whole, and as much as I probably imagine this is a Baptist choir put in their heart and soul, from what God gave them into this whole thing. Like, unfortunately, why is it necessary to the continuity of this, to continue with the story of this movie?
Yeah.
It just isn't.
No,
Like,
I mean, the only thing that is relevant into the story is that the preacher tells them about the yellow dragons and that's the only way they can be able to cross over.
That should have been the only thing. That should have been that. Like, it should have been, hallelujah, we rescued. Okay, how can we help you out? It's like saying, can you tell us how we can get to the meadows? Like, oh, yeah, well, you can just go over the land of the yellow dragons. Yeah. And then, obviously, you can go to the scene of the Valley of the Yellow Dragons. Like, job done.
Yeah.
That scene is now done.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, this came out in the 90s, so it was in that awkward period in which every single animated movie tried to be Disney and add in a whole bunch of songs. And, yeah, this is something...
Well, I'm not against adding songs. I'm just against, irrelevant songs.
Yeah,
you know
exactly.
what I mean? Like,
and this is something I'm going to talk about in the Happily Ever After discussion, but I'm just going to bring it up, really quickly. But there's a reason why Disney added songs into their movies. Was not only because it was able to progress the story, but it was also for character development. So yeah, I mean, other than the song being about Bosworth is free from the mud, it's like it doesn't progress the story any further, and we never know anything further.
I genuinely thought Bosworth was going to join like the crew and like say, oh hey, I can help you out, try and get this to the meadow.
Yeah, I mean that would have been an interesting idea. It's like, what if Bosworth decide, I'm going to join you along so that I can be able to lead you over towards where the yellow dragons were, because that's where my home was right before they came and destroyed it. And then maybe, after they found the medal, he could have said, I'm going to leave you off from here. I need to go back because, my mother's calling me or something.
Yeah, exactly. Like, maybe she could have been like, another friend, like, comes along for the ride. I don't know. Like, they could have done something more useful with that scene.
Yeah,
they really could. Like, add an additional character. Just progress it from there. The song number was unnecessary.
Yeah, I mean, there's only 3 song numbers in this whole thing, which, for a Disney movie, they usually add 5, and again, they add them for a reason.
Yeah,
they add them.
I mean, Cornelius' one, it makes sense. The Baptist one doesn't make any sense.
And then there's the end credits.
The end credits. Well, I mean, that's just the end credits. So,
yeah.
I mean, like, if anything, this movie should have had 2 songs. If anything, that's all it needed. You could have like done something. The only thing I'll say about this, that even though we've gone on this journey, we really don't learn all that much about our characters.
Yeah, have
you noticed that?
Yeah, I mean, let's see. Russell, he's just this overlooked hedgehog because he has so many brothers and sisters, and the only trait about him is that he likes food. And then we have Abigail, who's like the rambunctious field mouse, who's not afraid of anything.
And by the way, that was a girl character that took place lots of times in the 90s, so that's nothing new.
And then and then we have Edgar, who is like the timid character who's very smart, and he starts to learn how to become brave throughout the course of the movie, which again is very akin to a lot of timid characters that you would see in 90s movies.
Yeah, exactly. Like, unfortunately, the thing that goes against Once Upon a Forest, besides music and pacing, is just that there's nothing really new here that you're getting yourself into. These characters, if you're already immersed in 90s animation, or if you're already way ahead of a curve at that time, you already seen these characters you probably once, twice, or 3 times before. Like, there's nothing unique here.
Yeah. And again, going into, the whole Don Bluth thing, it's like you already kind of have an idea on what these characters are going to go in for. It feels like akin to Land Before Time or An American Tale, in which they're going to go through a lot of perilous adventures, and they're going to go over, obstacles that they have to overcome. I mean, it does feel like that. I mean, even when Abigail is chased by the owl, it does feel very similar to when Mrs. Brisby is confronting the owl from Secret of NIMH, or when Fievel is confronted by the Falcon from American Tail, Fievel Goes West. And, they have to travel to the meadow. It's very similar to Land Before Time, in which Littlefoot has to go over to the Great Valley. So, again, it does feel like diet Don Bluth, but, again, what made Don Bluth movies so great is not only the characters, but also the fact that it had this really great sense of story where it's able to take a lot of risks, but it has a happy ending to pay off with. And yeah, I mean, in here, it's like you just take the elements of what you think a Don Bluth movie should be, but you have pacing issues, you have one-dimensional characters, and you have song numbers that are pretty inconsistent.
Yeah, and funny enough, we're going to basically say that, which is really, hypocritical, I think, us to say, is that, the music I actually do like in this movie.
Well, I mean, it's
when it's done right.
It's James Horner. I mean, this guy was an amazing composer. He did such amazing music. He did Aliens. He did Titanic. He did, as mentioned before, he did, Land Before Time and An American Tale. Like, he was an amazing composer, and the fact that he sadly passed away almost a decade ago from a plane crash is absolutely tragic. And his stuff was so incredible.
Well, the great thing I think about his the British connections that he had at the time is that he could get the London Symphony Orchestra, which, if you've heard the London Symphony Orchestra, they are absolutely phenomenal. And, lucky enough, the show that I mention quite often is The Dreamstone, which is, a UK kids cartoon show. They got the London Symphony Orchestra to do that as well. They do such phenomenal work, and also just maybe a little personal moment is that, Elvis Presley with the London Symphony Orchestra was the music that me and Patricia danced to when on our wedding.
Yeah,
So.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, you have, the one thing that I actually do appreciate about Once Upon a Forest is that, a lot of these, environmental stories that we got in the 90s, they make it seem like the humans are the bad guys. In fact, a movie that we're going to be talking about later on, the villains are humans that are threatening the animals. And, the same thing happened with Fern Gully, The Last Rainforest. The same thing happened with Captain Planet and the Planeteers. But in this movie, it's one of the very rare cases in which that the humans are not the bad guys, not at all. I mean, they did it unintentionally, as mentioned before, when the gas was being leaked into the forest, it was done by accident because, one guy was drinking from a bottle and then he threw it into the street, and then that broken glass hit the truck wheels, and then the guy who was driving the truck ran over to grab some help, and then the help came by a few days later cleaning up the mess from the forest. And when Edgar is trapped in the cage, you would think that, oh no, the humans are going to take Edgar away. But no, he sets him free, destroys the cage, and they're cleaning up the forest of all the mess that they've done. So, yeah,
that was a nice moment when Cornelius said, all the things that I've seen, and he's actually really happy that there's a human basically just smashing up, a trap. And, it's nice to see that Cornelius kind of gets this, his arc is now like, oh, hey, maybe some humans are trustworthy. And, the thing about it is that it's a bit like, up the hill and down again. It goes way up and way down, I think, with Cornelius' story in that regard. And so I think, it would be interesting to see. I mean, you couldn't really do it because where on earth would you fit it where, where Cornelius is constantly having this, this hate relationship with humans until finally he starts to build up the fact that, oh, maybe they're not as bad as we thought they are. It kind of feels a bit like he was just shooting in the final third.
Yeah, unfortunately, they couldn't really do anything about it because Cornelius is not along for the journey because he's taking care of his niece Michelle because she was affected by the poisonous gas.
It makes you wonder, where maybe he probably. I mean, I get he's an old man who's has rheumatism and stuff. Rheumatism, I guess you could say. But it makes you wonder, should they probably bring him along for the journey? I guess, but I guess they couldn't do.
No, they couldn't do.
Or even better, when he said he made the invent, mind you, it would have ruined the plot device a little bit, really, of saying these kids have grown up because they created the giant version of his contraption in order to basically get home and to get the ingredients and stuff, and then so that's the reason why he's so amazed because wow, you built this. That was actually a really good moment.
It's actually a full circle moment because in the beginning of the movie, he brings in his invention to the students saying, this is my new contraption called the flapper wingama thing. And, they just want to play with it. They want to see how it works and they destroy it. And now...
Well, actually, unintentionally, because they didn't actually break it. It just suddenly, a book of it's talking about gravity fell onto it.
Yeah.
It wasn't really their fault that it broke.
Yeah, but then you have the full circle moment in which they build a larger version of the flapper wingama thing so that they can be able to get back to their home much quicker, and they can be able to grab the lungwort that is all the way up into the mountain, and then they are able to fly it all the way back to their home, and then he sees that they were able to build it and use it to fly back home. So again, that's a great full circle moment.
It is, yeah, and it's unfortunate really because this is one of those movies where there's some actually really great ideas in here. And how many times have I said that throughout all the podcasts that we've done? There's some good ideas here actually. You got Cornelius, who's the wise old badger. You've got all these kids who are going to go through this growing up moment, and but then you decide to just stick all these wrong ideas in there, there's this bird choir and this you put in shock moments, and then all of a sudden we just go completely sideways and go into another completely different direction with how we feel at the mood about this movie. It's there's so much inconsistency in all of this, and it just it feels it almost feels rushed. It really does. They couldn't just kind of sit down and think of what they had in front of them and can we just make this a bit more consistent? Can we just make this a bit more linear of going around with our characters, and doing something that feels like some more interactions with them, and moving them forward, and it just feels like they wanted to put in so much so that people did, in their eyes, the audience wouldn't be too bored of like what was going on. So different things had to happen at different times, but anything, it just kind of feels more like a variety show really, rather than it does like a solid full movie.
I wouldn't say a variety show. I would say it feels like sequence moments, where it's like, okay, you have one moment in which the kids are going over to school. Then you have the next moment in which you have this truck coming in and, releasing the poisonous gas. And you have another moment in which they have to now go over to
those
this
I don't have a problem with. It's more like, what we were talking about before, like, oh, hey, they're getting attacked by this owl, but, oh, hey, now we've got to have this fun, number about it, and then we're forgetting, like, the whole fact that, we're in a time crisis, for, trying to get the cure for, this girl, and we're just going into song numbers, and we're just getting distracted with all of the things, and we're not really, like, pushing the time here. Like, where did that go? And so that's what I'm talking about in regards to the consistency in story, like, and the consistency of, like, the urgency of the characters. It's almost like, the characters seem to switch agendas, per scene, and that doesn't really make a good story to tell in front of people when you're not really like when you're starting to kind of change phase on the situation at hand, bending on what the context when it changes, if you know what I mean. So I think that this is weakest points of his movie. Like, it just doesn't know who it's going to be, in a particular time, and I think that's the problem with it. So
yeah, I mean, I'll just have to say this, like, back in the 80s, like, Don Bluth made this look easy. Like, he was able to have a lot of sequence moments very similar to what you were saying before in both An American Tail and in Land Before Time.
I just want to just say to all the 90s kids out there, I'm talking about the strictly 90s kids, we're not talking about the same Don Bluth that did Rock-a-Doodle and a Troll in Central Park. No. We're talking about old school Don Bluth here.
Yeah.
Secret of NIMH Don Bluth.
We're talking about that. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, all those things that you were mentioning, both American Tail and Land Before Time did the same thing. Okay, you have Fievel finally making it into America after the wave crashed into him. And you have one moment in which, he's helping out the pigeon building the Statue of Liberty. Then he hears the violin. It's like, okay, now we're going to go into another side story involving with Honest John, and he's collecting the votes from all these dead mice so that he can be able to get votes. And you have his companion Gussie, who wants to be able to take down the cat. Okay, we're going to go into another moment in which we're going to have Tony, and, Tony's going to help him. But then he meets up with this Irish girl who wants to be able to, bring awareness to the cats, and then that gets sidelined. And then, Fievel gets captured by a guy who runs a sweatshop, and now he has to work for him. What about Warren T. Rat? And, he's going to be dragged down there. So it's like, yeah, all that stuff actually happens throughout the course of An American Tale, where you have all of these sequence moments happening all at once.
An American Tale, that sort of makes sense because, Fievel is going through New York City when he arrives. So,
yes.
That's what New York is. Like, it's not just one story. It's millions of stories going on at once. Anyone who's actually been to New York City would actually understand.
Yeah, not only that, but
and she grew up in New York City.
That's true, but I mean, as you can see from that poster right up there. And we're talking about, like, New York City in the year 1885, when a lot of immigrants from all over the world started coming into New York City for the land of opportunity and for them to make a new life. And you get to see the underbelly of everything, showcasing the lesson that, America wasn't always cracked up to be that all the stories were being spread about. Like, there are no cats in America and the streets are made of cheese and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
so,
but the one thing I'll say, though, is that, I mean, it's kind of unfair to compare An American Tale to Once Upon a Forest because, as we said before, American Tale is about, like, this whole giant adventure going through, like, the city of New York, whereas Once Upon a Forest, it kind of feels more like the simple times, like out in the country, and then all of a sudden this big disaster happens. And,
I know that. I'm just talking about the way
it's kind of like being out in, like, out in the South in America, and then all of a sudden a tornado comes whipping through town, and, like, it just all of a sudden, like, just throws everything into a frenzy.
I know, but I'm just talking about the story structure that, both of them kind of feel similar with but An American Tale actually works because it works within the context of where the story takes place.
Exactly.
And as for Once Upon a Forest, where you have like all of these side things happening. It's like, okay, you have the characters walking over towards the new meadow so they can find a cure for their friend. Okay, they get captured by an owl. Then the bird choir comes in. Then they're attacked by the yellow dragons. Then they find the meadow, and then you have all of these other animals fighting each other so that they can get an acorn because there's very little food left. And so, yeah, you have all of these things happening all at once, but it doesn't have the main focus of like, oh yeah, we need to actually find, these plants for our friend right before she dies because we only have a limited time. So, yeah, I mean, again, that's just goes to show you about how story structure, very similar case with A Land Before, with An American Tail, is able to do it well, while something like Once Upon a Forest wasn't able to do it all that well.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, I've really got nothing more to really say about Once Upon a Forest. I just think that, character-wise, I mean, they could have done better. Story-wise, they could have done better. And, the animation, I mean, like, it is actually really good animation, I could say in that regard.
It is
the way
definitely...
that it knew when to make things big and it knew when to make things small.
And to think that this was done by Hanna-Barbera, of all things.
Well, I mean, like, Hanna-Barbera had, they had the ability to do it. I mean, like, look at all the Scooby-Doo stuff that they've done. They've managed to make things feel like really scary and then really funny at the same time. Like, Hanna-Barbera are able to pull one emotion to another, so they are capable of doing it.
Yeah.
But I think with a project like this, I think that doesn't really surprise me that they're able to pull this off. The animation in this movie actually is very good, and that's one of the things I give it plus for as well. And also the music as well. Like, it's funny because this is a movie that seems to have the really good animation and then really good music at the same time, but unfortunately just where it's like it just doesn't have the the thought patterns, and it just doesn't have the feel that it should really have when you have something like this. And it does make you wonder, it really does miss Don Bluth, doesn't it? And it really does miss Steven Spielberg. Imagine if they were involved in this. I think they probably would have put it together way better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, they were busy with their other stuff. I mean, as mentioned before, we had Steven Spielberg not only doing Jurassic Park, but also around that time, he did Amblimation, which was his own animation studio. And
no, agree. I'm actually blanking now. What was the movie that you and I talked about that had Hans Zimmer doing the music? And then we were like, oh, wow, they did all this music, but then, the movie that was over the top of it just didn't meet the mark. I remember now. I'm trying to remember now. You know what? That's somewhere down the line, someone's going to point that out and say, oh, yeah. Oh, wait, hang on a second. It was Thunderbirds 2004.
Oh, that's right, yes.
Yeah, it was like, you have Hans Zimmer to do the music, and the only thing you can really come up with is basically, the Thunderbirds theme, and then he just mixes in, a bunch of, 2000s, techno music, if anything like that. And that's, imagine having somebody who is super talented like Hans Zimmer, and that's all you get him to do. It's so disappointing. And so maybe this is what Once Upon a Forest feels like as well. You've got all these talented animators, and you've got this really talented, composer, and you have all these London Symphony Orchestra, and you've got this really great thing together, and this is what you do with it.
Yeah.
And it's it's sad.
Yeah, it is pretty sad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's score this.
Well, here's the thing about this. I'm not going to be as cruel as I think some people might think I'm going to be. Keep this in mind. The animation, I think, is good. The music, actually, I think, is good. It's, you do somewhat get invested, in, some aspects of the story. It's just about it just gets distracted so many times. So there are some good elements here, and I do give some pluses here, but the minuses obviously weigh it down quite significantly to, not give it a great score. I'm going to go, and you might be very surprised to hear this probably, 4.5 out of 10.
Okay, yeah. I'll give it maybe, I'll just basically say that it's more or less an average film, so I'll just say it's a 5.
5, okay then. Well, I'll tell you what, actually, I'll say that too. 5 out of 10.
All
there
right,
we
then.
go.
Yeah,
there's something here, but unfortunately, it's not been realized.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. It's it has the animation, it has the music. Like I said before, you have, one of the writers and producers behind American Tail. You have the composer behind Terminator, Aliens, Titanic, Titanic, The Land Before Time, and American Tail in this movie, composing his great music. And you have the likes of Hanna-Barbera doing the animation. And you have an idea that sounds like it's really good on paper, bringing awareness to the environment, but unfortunately, there's some things that are missing, like great characters and a story that feels really consistent and straight to the point, as opposed to like going into a whole bunch of side stories and moments that just feels kind of disjointed. And so, yeah, I think that if they would have tightened it up a little bit and broadened out the characters more, I think that we could have had like a really great film that may have been overlooked at its time because it wasn't Disney. So, yeah, I think that, for a lot of people who grew up with the 90s, they have a lot of fond memories towards it. But yeah, there's a reason why only people who grew up in the 90s remember this movie, and it's not like a timeless classic that has spread throughout the generations compared to like other movies that came out during that time period. Like Cats Don't Dance, for example, or The Iron Giant, in which those were movies that failed spectacularly in the box office, but over the years it's gotten a major cult following because of word of mouth and re-releases on DVD and airings on TV. So yeah, I mean, that just goes to show you about, how those things are able to stay within the test of time of a lot of people. Something like Once Upon a Forest, sadly, does not. It's a time capsule of the 90s where we have a lot of movies focusing on the environment, as well as Hanna-Barbera's swan song into animated films. And if you're going to be posting in the comments like, oh, what about Josie and the Pussycats and Scooby-Doo and Yogi Bear? Those were Hanna-Barbera films. Well, no, because those were released in 2001, and at that point, Hanna-Barbera had shut down. And so, yeah, this is literally their last animated movie that they ever released in theaters. Yeah, so that's pretty much everything that we have to say about Once Upon a Forest. So, Aaron, what are we going to talk about next time?
Oh, this is going to be an interesting one. We are going to be talking about, and this is going to be on the 40th anniversary, we're going to be talking about the 1985 movie Rainbow Bright and the Star Stealer.
Oh, this will be really interesting because I haven't seen Rainbow Bright in so long.
Yeah, and maybe after you've seen this movie, maybe you'll find out why.
Until then, everyone, take care.